welcome back to the Pursuit of Happiness with me, Pigtail Girl, your friend and fellow traveller. And I am here in sunny Spain in my new piso. Excuse the backdrop. I did want to record outside in the sunshine, but sadly my computer just wasn't having it, didn't want me to do that at all. So here I am in the back cave as usual. I wanted to talk to you lovely people before too much time went by. Do excuse the hiatus my end. I've just had so much real life stuff to do. But I am thinking of you guys a lot. And recently I have been thinking about the Elohim and of course the true history of humanity, which is something that you all know interests me a lot. I'm very interested in the truth. And one of the things I've come to realize just personally is that there's nothing really new under the sun within his story. And the same things we see today, like the games, the ploys that we see today, were used 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. In fact, the way I see, since the dawning of handwriting, has existed propaganda, and I believe it because I believe that humans are still living in the dark ages. I believe we're in a dark age, and you can see today how news is manipulated. People who want to win over the population can lie through the news and through the media and through the building of history, who they were, what they did, whether the people love them. You know, we can see it via censorship today and memory holding, how easy it is to make good people look bad and bad people look good. And especially when you're giving them awards and statues and all this kind of thing and writing books, it's very easy to paint over the truth of history. And by 100, 150 years later, no one knows any different, right? No one knows any different. So the way I see it is the same things we see today used against us are the same things used against us since things have been used against us, if that makes sense. Because I don't believe that things were always being used against us. I do believe there was an era where mankind lived in, you know, this Atlantis, Lemuria type era, whatever those places were called. I don't actually know. I can't say I have any proof of the existence of those places, but any proof would have been deleted and destroyed in memory hold anyway, because that's how the incoming invading minion energy takes over. It deletes all the authentic history, takes you into the dark ages of ignorance and not knowing truth. And that's why I'm so into truth. It doesn't matter what the truth is, as far as I'm concerned. I have no dogma really attached to it, but I just want truth, because truth is the antidote to the dark ages. That's why I'm so obsessive about truth. Truth is really like a religion of mine, really. I don't attach to how that truth has to look. I just want it to be the truth, and I'm always searching for it, because the truth sets you free in a way that it brings enlightenment. It brings the light in, the light of truth. And so much effort is done to obscure the truth from us, so we never find the truth or know the truth. So anywho, looking at today, taking into account these same tricks have been passed on for generations and generations, I can sort of look back in retrospect and think about things slightly differently. Things like the Elohim, because we were given text trying to make us take the Elohim as good beings, creators, God even, you know, the name for the true most high God, you know, Elohim. But for a while I believed that, but is that the truth? Is that ultimately the truth? Are the Elohim actually a group? Now Mauro Biglino would have us think that yes, they were a group of beings, not just one. And it seemed that they were an entire colony of beings that were often married. So men and women, this idea of marriage and being in these couples, and they were warring, you know, seems to come from these Elohim. But a lot of the names of all the other Elohim and the history of the other Elohim have been obscured. And we are left with the story of Yahweh. And for a lot of people, this actually puts them off religion, because the stories of the Old Testament, it sounds like a very warring, psychopathic God who manipulates humans and plays tricks on humans and is deceptive and is cruel and really, and bombing things that displease it and all of this stuff and making humans run for their lives. But when you look further back, you find that Yahweh was only one of many Elohim and not even the highest up of the Elohim. He was just one of many. And I believe the Elohim now to be the same group as the Anunnaki, because we have many stories of these groups under different names. And of course, over the years, they have been dissolved and diluted and hidden and obscured and altered, of course, to serve a purpose. And I think many of the things in this story have been changed. Like one example is the fact that Yahweh used to have a wife called Ashera, I believe, and Astarte might have been another name for her. Forgive me if I've said the name wrong. And she was the goddess of fertility, Yahweh's wife. We're made to believe Yahweh had no wife now, because since the Abrahamic history took over our history, things have been changed, right? To suit the victors, the victor being whatever Elohim comes out on top, who can get the most humans to go to war for it, to battle for it, to worship it. That seems to have been the game. Who can get the biggest, best group of humans and then fight them against other Elohim's groups of humans and come out on top, tippity top, right? And it seems like they're, even in the Greeks mythology, you have all these stories of these couples, men and women, who were very jealous, and this one's wife was shagging around with that one's husband and having kids there, and and there was a lot of jealousy and chopping off of heads and trying to kill their kids, and it seemed like they were a very dysfunctional, warring group who may well have been DMA infested, who may well have been reptilian, who may well have been various groups. There could have been different groups within them. I don't know who this Elohim fraction are. One thing I don't believe is the story we're given about them. One, I don't believe they're good guys. Two, I don't believe they created everyone. I think they might have genetically manipulated certain races and groups, but I don't think they're the progenitors of the human race. I believe those are the true star ancestors, the ones that set us up in societies that were doing very well previous the incursion of this other group, the Anunnaki, the Elohim. And we were living in the Atlantic era of of humans doing very well, full of spirituality, art, science, medicine, progress, knowledge, maybe more peaceful. And then it disintegrated and we went into warring times. And then over the time since that group came in, I don't believe we were created by them to be slaves. See, that's some of the false news they've tried to weave into our story, is the fact that one, they're our creator gods, and two, they created us to worship them or to be some sort of slave for them. Now, I don't believe that. That's telling all humans that we were created as like cattle or as slaves. And you can see that slave energy of enslavement has been around since that group of the Elohim. And even in the old Gospels, there's talk of God telling you how to treat your slaves, or how slaves should react or behave, and all this stuff about slavery. Now, the true divinity that I know, don't think I'm doing a Baphomet symbol here, I'm just saying my fingers are just going like that. This true God that I know, the divine, it is not a god of slavery. It's not a god of worship. Never asked. In fact, it's a god of freedom. And the true divine family is pushing the freedom fighters on to free us from the slave, false matrix of slavery, which was implanted into us, eons ago. And it's very unhealthy. It's very of the DMA. It's the negative energetic. It's the false matrix. Slavery is the false matrix. Freedom is the true matrix, the proper matrix, the divine matrix. Is all about freedom. And it works. You can see how nature works. Nature works, it's very free. It's a free for all, you could say, nature. It's not a slave matrix. So slavery is a glitch in the proper matrix, otherwise known as the false matrix. The false matrix is the layering over the proper divine bodywork of everything, of false things that shouldn't be here, that aren't for our highest good. Things that want us to become distorted and invert. It's an inversion of the divine matrix, the proper matrix, as Starfire Tor calls it. So we have these different energies at play. One, we were living with true star ancestors, and we were living in a good developing society. We weren't in the dark ages. We were in a time of enlightenment. And then this invading group, the Anunnaki, the Elohim, took over our history and took us into the dark ages. And the dark ages was a time when we were altered on some level to reduce our capacities. So, we hear of the Tower of Babel, so humans couldn't communicate with each other anymore, and God was angry, didn't want us to communicate anymore. That again, that's not God. That's not true divine. That's God, little g. That's Elohim. That's Elohim. And so we have all these stories that I believe we're talking about some sort of bio warfare that was done on mankind. I believe that something was done to us, shortened our lifespan, shortened our capacities, closed us down. And actually, if you go to my Subliminal Junkie channel, I've just done a subliminal trying to undo some of that, called The Shining Ones, that you might like to go and try. It's supposed to reverse, I mean, it's all experimental, reverse the aging process that was done to us and try to extend and expand the lifespan and open up our potential again. So I made a subliminal for that on my Subliminal Junkie page. So I believe that this shortening of our lifespan, of our capacities, of our abilities, was all done by this Elohim group. And then they took over our history and filled it with their propaganda and their stories and destroyed all the rest. Because remember, we have knowledge of whole libraries being burnt down, institutions being set up to confiscate things and hide them away. So much effort has been put into hide things from our past from us, hide history or our story from us and replace it with his story, right? His story, whoever he is, this a fake story, this fake narrative. And this has been going on for eons and eons and eons. The Vatican hiding loads of stuff underneath in its vaults. That's been going on for hundreds of years. The Jesuits also were manipulating information. And, we don't even know that all the information the Sumerians were being made to keep about the Anunnaki, it was all controlled. The scribes were controlled. What you could write was controlled. You were enslaved to those beings. How you know you were enslaved to them is they had control over you and your lives. They had the button they could press that could destroy your town or bring it, prosperity. So, these were warmongers. This had nothing to do with God, big G. This was all little g stuff or big ET stuff with the E to the T. It was all extraterrestrial infiltration of humanity. And I believe that really brings us up to date. And so I've seen that, when you get into the New Age stuff or you see some oracle cards, they talk about the light codes of the Anunnaki or the meditation with the Elohim. I would steer well clear of all that. Now, I do pick a pole tarot reading sometimes on YouTube, and it makes me laugh when one comes up and it's the light codes of the Anunnaki. There were no fucking light codes from the Anunnaki. They were CUNTs who were fucking us up, excuse my French, but that's the only way I can describe it. They were messing with us. They weren't giving us any light codes. They were giving us dark codes and false matrix codes. That's what they were giving us. So we've been tricked to think they're the good guys, to call upon them as if they were the good guys, to try to download things from them as if they were some good guys. They're not the good guys. The good guys are not preserved in our history. The good guys have been wiped from our history. And what's interesting is that Asherah, the wife of Yahweh, who was erased as well from the Jewish text, she was supposed to have given birth to 70 sons for Yahweh, 70 sons that were to rule upon the earth. So again, we have the story of this lineage, of these ruler gods who had children together. Not very godly, actually had children together. Now, some people say, oh, it's just symbolic. I don't believe that. And all of the stories of these 70 children, their names, try and go and find out what they were called. You can't find it. You can't find it. Even from the ancient systems, it's really hard to find. Okay, so who were these 70 children? But then when you think of all of, the other gods and goddesses of old that have all been destroyed, all their statues, all the idols, everything, the temples, a lot of it was just destroyed. The books, the tablets, you can try to go to look for it. You'll see some little remnants of it. In the Egyptian art, you can see some remnants of it. In the Canaanite stories, you can see, there was Baal worship. We can see that there were other deities and there were other energies. But of course, we're told they're all evil. But what's interesting is you see these groups today that we're supposed to, like we hear about, those minion groups, and they all pray to all of those ancient beings, the Moloch, the Baphomet, the what, and they're into all this Nimrod and Gog and Magog, all of these things. They're right into all of that. But why is it? It's because they trace themselves back to that group. That's why I always say they're not exactly Satanists. People say, oh, they're Satanists, oh, they do satanic rituals, they're Satanists. I think the satanic element of that group is it's almost surface energies, because really it goes back to all of those Elohim. That's really who they try to contact. That's really who they believe they come from. They probably did. And that's who they're trying to connect to back through. It's not so much Satan, it's that entire, that's why they do stuff to Moloch and Baphomet and all these energetics, and they have like the Shivas and the Shakti, and they use all of the imagery, all the statues, and they go around the world trying to find all the names of all the ancient gods and goddesses, and they use all of them, right? They're all inclusive. They really are all inclusive. And I think it goes back to that they have some understanding of that knowledge that they think sets them above us, of the truth of our history with that group, the Elohim, that warring group, that they were there to like keep the slave matrix going for them while they went underground. I don't know where they went to regroup after some battles with the good guys who were still here. God, I don't have all the answers, please. I don't pretend I've got all the answers. I'm just like, I'm just trying to get little bits, like put it all together. But all I'm doing is like looking at what goes on today and then using that same knowledge to think, well, it's the same shit that they did back then, right? So anyone we think of as the good guys, I have to question and think of them as the bad guys. To be honest, but it doesn't mean I necessarily just think, oh, Lucifer's the good guy, so he must be the good guy. Because I see all of those energies as really the same group, all of these names, all of these stories. But what I mean is that there are other groups completely that we don't know about or hear about, that have been completely erased from our memories, who were the good guys originally. So that would have been the star ancestors, the ones that still today, some of the tribal groups who had oral traditions, so they couldn't be burnt. Oral traditions can't be burnt down. You can't burn the libraries. You can't destroy everything. You could try to kill the indigenous groups, but if some survived, they still had their oral stories and songs and traditions that kept some of the truth going for us. So we might hear about the Nomo people, or in the Dogon tribe, you might hear about some groups from Sirius or from whatever. We still maybe have some remnants with the native people who still have that intact lineage back to their indigenous roots of some of the true stories of our past. But when it comes to the written word, and don't forget that in the old days, a civilization was dictated as people who had writing, who could take records, who had written word. That's what made us non-barbarians, was that, oh, we can write stuff down because we are the propaganda keepers. That was what deemed us a civilization. If we are within those civilizations that gets their stories from the books, it's not the same as being from those groups that gets their story from the tongue. And of course, stories can change with Chinese whispers, but those tribes had a way of keeping their knowledge alive through the storytellers, and they would have to learn them word for word exactly. So as far as I can see, the Elohim are to blame for all the Abrahamic text, and that all of those texts are really trying to talk about something that was going on linked to that group. And now you can obviously make what you want from it all. I'm just telling you what I've been making from it lately. And I've been listening a lot to Mauro Biglino and his direct translations of the biblical stories of the Old Testament quite a lot. I mean, it can be quite lengthy to sit there and go through them all, especially when they're in Italian and you have to read all the subtitles. But I'm finding it very interesting. And he himself says he likes to take it as if it's a factual explanation of something that was going on back then. at least partly factual, you know, at least on some level. And especially when you have different people telling that same story in different places, different languages, different areas around the same time. Now, to me, some of the stories that we have may have been us trying to write down things to remember them that had already happened and which, you know, pre-flood, and that we were then trying to write down to preserve. So some of the knowledge might have got written down and accidentally muddled up, might not necessarily be full on propaganda, depends on which groups are writing them. But when you hear about someone that was God's scribe, who was trained up and given special favor by God to sit there and write stuff down, in my mind, I get an automatic woo, 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 propaganda, propaganda. This was someone who had been deemed controllable enough, someone who was a good citizen in the eyes of that Elohim to sit and write something down, right? And yeah, and the Elohim themselves, they had many names. There was the name for the Most High, was it El Elyon? Was the Most High of the Elohim. So the El Elyon was the commander over the Elohim, and there were lesser Elohim, and they all seem to have been male and female, husbands and wives, that were given the right to rule over tribes or groups of humans. So something to think about. I've definitely come to the conclusion that Anunnaki, Elohim, dark reptilians, dark aliens is all pretty much the same group in our history. I think they're all the same group, and anything written by those people for us, I take it as a lie. I take it as a false story given to me as an overlay to try to stop me understanding my true story or my true history, which I'm still patiently waiting for, which may or may never appear, because unless I have a time machine, all the good guys want to turn up and be like, oh yeah, look, would you like, this is some video we made of what was going on back then. Yeah, we've got 10 million hours of it. Would you like to sit down and watch it? I'd be like, hell yeah. Oh my God, I would so love to see some real footage and unedited video of what was going on back then in the good old days when this true star ancestors battled the dark minion infiltrators, shall we call them, that then changed our history and changed our DNA, RNA, our genetic makeup, and made our lifespans shorter and diminished our capacities, which we are still living in today. I mean, this is it. We're still living in that energy, and it's still going to that wants to completely enslave everything, because the enslavement matrix is the opposite of the freedom matrix, which is the divine proper matrix. So always remember that the two are not the same. So you want to always try to attach yourself and pull yourself into the proper matrix, the divine matrix, the one that was really created for us to be in, and don't try to get out of the matrix. You want to get out and shatter the false matrix. The false matrix is the one that this infiltrating group tried to hook us into, to invert everything. Okay, my dears. So just wanted to pass on some of my little ponderings that I've been going through recently, and say hello and send out love to all of you. Thank you so much for all of you who still stick with me, even though sometimes I go on a bit of a wander and have to go and do God's work with a big G out there in the real world. Thank you for still being here. I love you all, and I will see you on the next episode of The Pursuit of Happiness. One love.